week 3 blueprint. Blueprint is nice in that there's actually 2 ways you can add things. You can either right click and type what you want, or what you usually end up doing is you actually drag a wire from the thing you care about and you let go on a blank space. The reason why this is better is because this menu is actually context sensitive. It's going to give you the list of only the things that can be connected to what you have a wire on right now. Okay? So almost always you're going to drag a wire from this thing. See how this list is much smaller than this list here? Because it's context sensitive. And then this list, the right click menu, is everything. So it's almost everything, because even when you right click, it's still going to try its best to try to tell you what you think, what it thinks you need. This button up here is the kind of like the override switch. If you uncheck this checkbox, it'll basically show you every single possible blueprint action possible. So even here, it makes the list even bigger. It's pretty rare that we're going to use this guy here, but in the case where you just cannot find it, but you know it exists, but you think Blueprint is not showing it to you, you can uncheck this guy here. We're not going to worry about that for now. We're just going to worry about dragging a wire from here. And there's a very common Blueprint action called a print string. So I want you guys to search for that and add it to your Blueprint. And then just compile it up here in the top left. And I always save, so I always hit Control S to save. And then hit Alt P to play it. You should see text in the top left that says hello. And if you're not sure, just hit Escape and then press Alt P again. Sorry, with you can change the text here.
No, like in the play menu, like make it bigger or change the color or something.
Oh, we're gonna get to that later. This only is really used for kind of your purposes, not necessarily the player. What the player is going to use is you're talking about like the play button or like the quit button that games have. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that kind of stuff is done using the HUD. It's similar. It's similar to this, but I'm kind of starting with like the very basic stuff for now. But the in the HUD, it'd be instead of a print string, there's actually something called a draw text, which will draw text on the screen and lets you pick like the font and lets you pick how long it's shown for, the color, all that kind of good stuff. We will get to that too. Right. So do you have this? Does Michael and John, you guys got this? Okay, you good? All right. Now I want you to hook up a different print string to here, the left mouse button pressed. And in this case, I just want to type left mouse button pressed. Let's see if that works. So now when you're in the game, if you click, you should see left mouse button pressed. Let me know when you guys got it. Good? Okay. I want to just dive into this print string function a little bit more. I'm going to call these things functions, these blue boxes, because they have a little F in the top left, and they actually ultimately translate to a function in code. There's a little downward-facing arrow here that you can click. And this will give you just a little bit more options. You can just change the text color. You can choose whether it prints to the screen at all or only prints. There's basically a log file that gets written out to disk as a text file. I can change this guy to be like maybe a fancy pink. Okay. Try also hooking something up to the released. Make sure that works. Now it shows me when I pressed it, and also when I released the left mouse button. So this stuff is really trivial, but it's just keep in mind it's really super important to go slowly with this stuff because it's there's a ton of blueprint functionality we're going to get into, and you guys are going to get much better at this as we go. But keep in mind this is where we're going to start. So did you guys get the left mouse and press and release, both of you? Okay, cool. All right, now let's do the tick one. So we're going to print a string. This time we're going to do something a little different. We're going to drag the delta seconds off of here. We're going to plug it directly into the string. And this is something that we haven't done yet. But notice here, both of these have inputs. They're on the left side of the function. That means that they can respond to inputs. So notice here, this little guy, when you drag a wire, he becomes a green wire. The colors here are really important. It's important to note that white is always going to mean execution. This is always going to be what's going to drive the execution of your blueprint. Any other color is going to be a variable. So in this case, green is a floating point number. It's like a decimal number. But you can plug this into things like the string here. And as I hover over this guy, it's going to show me that, hey, it's going to automatically convert this thing to a string. Don't worry about what that exactly does. I mean, it's going to make it so that you can see the delta seconds, but I'm going to get into more detail about variables and such in just a little bit. And it's going to insert this little converter box in between the two. It's going to automatically make it correct for you. So we'll get into more of that, exactly what that's doing in just a bit. But connect this up to event tick, and then go ahead and press play. So you can only connect this guy to here, and this delta seconds, you can't really connect it to execution wire. Look what happens when I try to plug this green guy into the execution wire. Just look at the hover. It says float is not compatible. You get a little red circle with a line through it. But if you plug it in here, you get a little box in between. And then when you play it, remember what I said about delta seconds being really small? That's how many seconds pass between each render frame. It's going really fast, right? You guys have this both? Is it working for you, Michael? Yeah. Yeah, it's printing out how much time takes between seconds. And if you do something like here, so notice I bring up a little window on the bottom left here. Look at my delta. Can you read that? It says 0.33. Look how slow it's going. And as soon as I go back to the game, it speeds up again. That's because it's going really slowly because the game isn't having a chance to update as often, right? Okay. Cool. Really simple stuff. Let's do something more interesting now. So now that you guys are aware, Blueprint is an event-based system. It means that something happens on the left, whether it's a left mouse button or event taking play or tick, and then it causes behavior to happen because of that, right? So here, left mouse button was pressed, and then we print a string. When it was released, it does something else. When the level starts, it does something else here too. And notice you can daisy chain these things to more objects here, as I proved earlier. So something happens in the game, and it in turn causes something else to happen. So we are going to hook into one of these events to change the behavior of one of the lights in the level. Okay? So let's go into the level here. And I'm going to add a point light to the scene. And I want this point light to be kind of really obvious that it's on. So I'm going to take this point light, and you can just add a point light by going up here to the lights menu and then just dragging it into the scene. And I'm going to make the light really obvious. And maybe making intensity really bright. So you can clearly see there's a light there. You guys both have a light in the level yet? Try changing color and whatnot. So what we're going to do is we're going to just have our blueprint just turn this light off when the level starts. And you're going to do that by, you could do that normally if you go down to the rendering properties and uncheck the visible checkbox here. This thing will let you hide and unhide the level. Are you guys good? You have a light, Michael and John? Okay. So Blueprint interacts with your map in a very simple way. Whatever you have selected in the map, you can reference in Blueprint. So if we want to turn this light off when the level starts, we first need to grab a reference to the light. So I'm going to keep this light selected here, and I'm going to go back to my level blueprint. And I'm going to just go to a new section. No, I'll go down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click. And in this menu now, you guys will see this new entry called Create a Reference to Point Light. You should see this little guy show up. Do you guys, you have this?
Will we search for create a reference to point light?
It should just be right at the top. Like in this case, you don't have to search. It should just be like the third item from the top.
Okay.
You guys got it? So you should get this little guy here. Now this little guy is neither an event or a function. So he's neither one of these guys or these guys. This guy is a reference. So he is kind of like you can imagine he is the representation of this light that's in the level in Blueprint. So this guy is that light. Okay? This guy is the same thing as that light, but now you can use him in Blueprint. You can use him however you want. And the nice part is that he's very simple. He only has one wire coming off of him, but that one wire is super powerful. Like he has a lot of functionality in this wire. So what I want you to do is drag a wire from the point light, from the blue wire, and I want you to search for visibility. And what we're going to do is we're going to, you have the choice here, but we're going to use toggle visibility. And notice when you did that, it created this new function. Oh, toggle visibility point light component. If you have a selection between the two, it really doesn't matter which one. I just used a point light component because it is a point light, but either will work. So here is a new function. He has one input for an execution wire, like everything else does, right? Like the print string. He has two inputs for variables. Don't be deceived by the color of these. They're just more input links, just like this guy, the string is. These are inputs. All right, so what this means, and let me take a break here for a second because I need to explain about why some functions will have inputs and why some don't. Toggle visibility is just a function that says, hey dude, I will toggle the visibility on whatever you need me to do, but you have to tell me what you want. So in this case here, toggle visibility takes not only an execution wire here, but he also is requesting who you want to toggle the visibility on. So in this case, what are we feeding in here, right? The point light. We're telling it the target is the point light. This is what it looks like normally. So it's just basically, it doesn't know who to toggle visibility on. But we're going to click the point light. And by dragging a wire from the point light into empty space and letting Blueprint create this for us, it automatically connected the two. I could do the same thing by typing right click here and typing toggle visibility. In this case, it's not helping me. I could do this and then drag the wire myself manually. But in this case here, it does the same thing, but adds a little bit more complexity. In fact, what the right way to do it is to do it here. with toggle visibility, which will then automatically connect the two. So now toggle visibility will run. It'll say, hey, who do you want me to run on? What it's going to do is look from this wire and look who's connected to it and find out, oh, it's the point light that wants the visibility toggled off. Okay? And then finally, this thing is not actually connected to anything to run. Notice there's no execution wire. What I want you to do is connect the execution wire that's currently connected to here. So you can, this guy is still connected. You can drag a wire from this guy into here. And when you play, the light should turn off. The light should be off. So this is the event begin play. It prints a string, and then it will toggle the visibility. Do I still have you guys? Does that make sense so far? Any questions on this guy here? Propagate to children. That sometimes you'll have something that has a lot of lights attached to it. Like let's say you have like a lantern or something, and maybe that has 4 lights connected to it. And let's say you want to turn off all the lights, and you have a lantern placed in the level. If you just tell the lantern, hey, toggle your visibility, and you click propagate to children, all of its child lights will also turn off. That's all it means. Does this work for you guys? It turns off the light in the level?
Oh yeah. I can't get my light. I lost my light.
The reference to it in the level, in the blueprint?
Yeah, and I can't find it.
Just if you can't find a point light, you can either search here in the scene outliner, or click on it in the level, and then go back to your blueprint. You can also search. It's probably easier. If you're done, Michael, the next thing I want you to do is toggle the visibility when you click the mouse. Every time you click the mouse, just toggle the visibility on the light. And then every tick. Okay. Weird. Delete that guy? Yeah, try, first drag this guy to be on this, drag that panel, like you can drag it by the tab. Yeah, dock it, yeah, that'll help a lot. And then where is your point light that you pressed?
It's gone. Yeah, I deleted it.
Oh, okay, just drag a new one in there.
Oh, there it is. So just drag it into the
Yeah, drag it into the scene. Well, drag it into the scene and then change the color of it so it really moves. So take that light and kind of, I would say move it here. Move it down so it's on the floor. I just want you to be able to tell. And then change the properties of like the light color. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. And just play first and make sure that's actually visible. So, okay, so you see the green light there? Okay, cool. Now you have that light selected, so go back in the blueprint. And now you can right click in your blueprint here. And see that create a reference to point light right there? Yeah. And then you can delete that thing. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Also, you should probably zoom in. Here, hold on for a second. So let's just back up for a minute here. Let's clean up this guy. Let's delete that guy and zoom in here. So that point light there is a reference. So remember what I said about this guy? He basically has one thing that he can do, which is you drag a wire from him.
Toggle visibility.
Yeah, from the point light to toggle visibility. So that's the first thing you're going to do. Drag a wire from him. So don't do it this way. Actually, do it context sensitive. Yeah, it's going to be a lot easier for you. Yeah, and then tight toggle visibility here.
That's why I couldn't freaking find toggle visibility.
Yeah, because it's kind of counterintuitive, but you want to do it from the light first.
And then this guy's here.
Yeah, so it actually follows. Look at the direction of the arrows. It goes this way, and then you're going to connect to this guy.
Here or here?
What do you think?
From here.
Yes. So yeah, because look at the white wire. This thing is always going to represent where you connect the execution wire to. It's always going to go left to right. And then it's going to be like, cool, I'm going to talk about visibility on who? And it's going to be like, oh, the point light.
Alright.
You might need to compile as well. So get in the habit of like compiling it and then pressing play. All right, the left. Yes.
That's good, yeah?
Yes. So now I want you to set it up so when you click the mouse button, that it toggles the visibility on the light.
Okay.
And then I want you to set it up so every frame, yeah, like that. It does that. Try adding one more light, Michael, in your level. So add 2 lights, and then have them both have that behavior.
So I want to make like do what now?
When you click the left mouse button, I want you to toggle the visibility on that light. And also,
I have a flashlight feature on my gun.
yeah, you can
In that one spot.
if you want to, you can like bind it to the F key. You can try that. Just right click anywhere. Just right click anywhere, and then type F, like literally the letter F. Yeah, that guy. Just F.
Any one of these?
Yeah. So when you press F, you can have it follow the visibility on the thing.
So would I disconnect this?
Yeah, if you don't want to have the left mouse button.
Yes.
Yes.
I disconnect something.
Oh yeah. Hey Michael, so if you want to disconnect the wire, hold down Alt and click on the arrow.
From the source?
Yeah, from the source. Hold
I'll
on
just
Alt.
right click and it says right click.
You can do that too. I just
Yeah.
find Alt left clicking to be way faster. It's way more efficient. Of course, it's not attached to you, but we'll get into that later.
Well, that's pretty damn cool.
It's cool that you can connect it, right? Okay.
And then something about flashing?
Yeah. So every tick, I want you to also toggle the visibility just to prove that works.
How do I make one of them on?
Oh, by default. So go into the properties down here, and if you scroll down, you eventually get to the rendering properties. That is good. So that'll be off by default, and you can toggle it on. See, notice what happened there. When you connected it, disconnected it. So this is a feature actually of Bluetooth. It's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's just one of these guys cannot split into 2 wires. You have to do them in sequence, just like Christmas lights. Yep, exactly. I can't even tell. It might be there, but it's really hard to see. Is your blue light actually bright enough to be seen? Did you get it happening every tick? Yeah. Okay. All right. I want to move on to the next example because while this is cool, I want to really get into some of the meat and potatoes blueprint. So I mentioned already that Blueprint is context sensitive, and we already have, even within our simple graph, a lot of different colors of wires. These colors are actually signify the type of Blueprint object that you're interacting with. White is always going to be execution wire. Executions always go in the direction of the arrow, left to right. And so if you want something to happen, you're always going to plug it into the left here. What is the difference between this thing and this thing here?
That's a switch, and that's what's being switched?
Yes, right. So this is actually this is the thing that toggles the visibility. I'm going to call these functions. Okay, these are functions that perform some action. This guy's a function. He's blue. This guy's a function. Okay, this is not a function. You can tell it doesn't have a box around it. It has like an oval type. I don't know, rounded rectangle. I think. It also doesn't have the little F in the top left, nor does it have a little red header bar. This right here is a reference. These things don't do anything. They by themselves are not functions. They don't fire execution wires like events do. All they do is they store a reference to something else. Okay? Like I said, this thing represents your point light in the level. He is the point light. And the point light by himself doesn't do anything. Like he has a light radius, but he can't affect the world around him. He is basically the guy that receives instructions on what to do. So in this case, this function here is going to is using this point light as the target. So this point light is just like sitting around minding its own business, and other guys are interacting with it. We're going to get into more of this very soon. Okay, let's do trigger. So triggers are like probably one of the most commonly used game constructs in game development. Like, I can't tell you how many triggers I've placed in my career, but it's been a lot. And a trigger is just either a box or a circular cylinder that is typically in the level somewhere, that when the player walks into or out of, something happens. Think of all the cases where triggers happen, like, oh, I get close to an NPC, and then they start talking to me, or they bring up a prompt saying, hey, you want to get a quest from this guy. Or maybe another example of trigger is a pickup. So if you ever picked up something in a game, when you walk over it, that actually is just a trigger on that object. So when you touch it, it says, oh, someone entered my trigger, I'm going to perform some behavior. So triggers are... Yeah, exactly, proximity lines, yeah. Or like spike pit traps. Those are another examples of triggers, right? You enter a spike pit, you actually, even though the spike pit may look like you hit the spikes, most of them are just boxes that are like, hey, there's a box surrounding the spikes, and then when someone enters the box, that's when you kill them, right? So triggers are ubiquitous. They're used everywhere for almost everything. We're going to use triggers a lot, so might as well do a little work with triggers. I want to delete, why don't you guys just, let's delete all of this. I know you guys love your toggle visibility stuff, but that's the toggling of lights can only take you so far. We're still going to toggle lights, but we're going to do them through a trigger. So let's go into the level. I'm going to move this light just a little bit in front of me. I'm going to move this to be on top of the box, maybe, in my level. Just so I have like a reference point here. So my idea is that I want to not shoot the box. I can't help it. I want to walk up to this box, and when I walk up to the box, that's when I want to turn the light off. And this box doesn't really have any, maybe I'll just move the box out of the way. Let's just make it so I walk up to the light, and then the light will turn off. So right now, the things that we're toggling light, you guys hooked it up to the left mouse button, you hooked it up to like when the level started, and also every tick, so it flickered really fast. We can do the same thing, except instead of any of those, what we can do is we can fire an event when someone walks into a trigger. Just like any other event, just like when you press the left mouse button, a trigger fires an event. So go to the top left here, and go to volumes. And I'm just going to show you where this is. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's trigger volume. It's easier, honestly, to type trigger. And I want you to just drag the trigger volume into the level, kind of on top of the light. And kind of size it appropriately. That's probably a good size for me. You can scale it as you want. Okay, you guys have a trigger volume placed? It should look like that. Yeah. Okay. It should also say trigger volume here in the details panel. Okay, keep that trigger volume selected and go into the blueprint. So kind of like how we did it with the light, with the trigger volume selected, when we right-click, we're not going to create a reference to the trigger volume. While this can be useful in some cases, triggers are kind of a special behavior. What we want is when someone walks into the volume, we want an event to fire, right? So right-click, And the name of that event is on actor begin overlap. So instead of all that, just type overlap. As soon as you type overlap, the first item in that result is on actor begin overlap. So go ahead and add that guy. I just want to make sure it looks right. It should say on actor begin overlap, and then in parentheses it should say trigger volume. Okay? Does it say trigger volume for you too, John?
Is it add on actor begin overlap?
Yeah, just type overlap, and it's like the first thing in the list up here. Okay, does it say trigger volume in parentheses?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. What that trigger volume in parentheses means is that, hey, when the trigger volume has overlapped with anything else in the level, this execution wire is going to fire. Just like the left mouse button does, this thing does some behavior, right? And then this other actor is the person that interacted with us, okay? So what I want you guys to do is I want you to toggle the visibility on the light when the actor begin overlap fires. So think back to how you actually remember how you added the light to begin with? I want you to do that again, this time from scratch, and toggle the visibility. You have to remember how it's done, right? Yeah, and then we're going to do one more thing with the trigger after this. Nice, perfect. Exactly right. There it goes. So, I mean, we're using a light here, but think of it not just as a light. Yeah, it could be anything. It's just, the light is just to prove that something happened, right? Yeah, every time you go into it, every time you go into that trigger, it toggles it again, right?
It'd be fun to have like a shit ton of those down the trail. So
Yeah, or like you could use these for like particle events. Like imagine that the player, like Indiana Jones style, or like you step into a trap or whatever, and it starts some behavior. Triggers are really common for that kind of thing. So here, let me do that with you guys quick. I have the lights selected here. Create a reference. So let's do one more thing with the trigger, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Go back and select your trigger again. Triggers also can tell you when people stop, people leave the volume. So with the trigger selected, I want you to type overlap again, but this time we're going to use the on actor end overlap, which is the second item in the list. And all I want you to do is just hook that up to toggle visibility as well. What will those actually do? It means that we'll turn the light off when you go in, and when you leave the volume, it'll turn the light on again. It toggles it based on whether you are inside or outside of the volume.
refrigerator light.
Yeah, or door is a good example of when this thing could be useful. So I step in here, I step out, step in, and as I enter the trigger, the light turns on, and as I leave, the light turns off. Okay? All right, you guys both got this, right? All right, so for this next part, I want to show you how to set it up so you have two lights. Michael, you already did this, but I'm going to just go over this again for posterity. If I were to say, take this light and duplicate it, and so I have a green light here. So I have a red or a blue and a green light. And if I want to turn them both off, here's what I would try to do at first. So I would I have my green light selected. I'm actually going to name this guy green light, and I'm going to name this guy blue light, just so that when I'm in there in Blueprint, this guy, see how he's actually changed to be blue light now? So with my green light selected, I'm going to create a reference, and I'm going to do the same thing where I want this guy to also toggle visibility. But now I want both of them to turn on and off at the same time. So, and this is more like, John, this is kind of for you because you didn't get a chance to do this yet, but if I wanted to turn both of them off, right, I would think, okay, I have this guy connected here. Let me just connect this guy as well, like do both at the same time. See how I have 2 wires coming off of him? One here. If I connect this guy here, watch what happens to the first wire on top. I'm going to just, let me just do this right here. So notice here, I'm going to try to connect it to both, and it keeps deleting the one. And that's because Blueprint will not let you have 2 wires coming off of the same event or any function. You can't split wires like this. You have to connect them up daisy-chained like they're Christmas lights. You have to do them in sequence.
So you just would connect that first, the blue light to the green light.
Exactly, like
Makes
this.
sense.
Yeah. And the reason why this is important is Blueprint has to know what order you want things to happen. Back in Kismet in Unreal 3, you could totally do this where you drag 2. Kismet absolutely lets you do that. But then which one happens first? So it was really confusing in Kismet. So now they fixed that so you can only have one thing on at a time. Okay? I just wanted to share that because it's important to know that you can't have multiple things fire. If you did have a case where you want to have more than one thing happen at a time, there are ways to do it without necessarily connecting them together, but we won't worry about that for now. We'll get into that later. They're called sequence nodes. Okay. Let's do one more thing. Let's add, let me undo what I had here, go back and put my other on-end overlap here. I have my green light, which I'm going to delete, it was just an example. What we can do now is also, let's just add a little bit of a delay in between the two. It's super easy. If you want to, this is like a trick. Drag a wire. See how these both have, they're both going into the same node. If I drag a wire, you can drag wires backwards too. So drag a wire backwards from the toggle visibility, and I want you to type delay. And now delay, I want you to just add like a half-second delay, and then I want you to connect, instead of connecting directly into toggle visibility, I want you to connect it to the delay instead. And all this is going to do is going to make it so that when you step into the light, it's going to take half a second for it to turn off. And half a second for it to turn off, or turn on again. Okay? And remember, you can kind of stick delays. Delays are really common too. I mean, that's like a really easy way to slow down the behavior of things. You could try like put a 2-second delay on there. Okay. I just want to show that you can add a delay. Okay. You guys good? We're going to make a door next. go over doors, and if we have time, I'm going to go over pressing buttons to open. We'll just have a door that opens when you get close to it. Should be pretty easy. But I'm going to show you guys some more with the level blueprint functionality, and then we'll get into class blueprints later. So just keep in mind that the door we're about to make is kind of the old way. I would never make a door in Unreal 4 if I were to make a game using it in the level blueprint, but it's totally possible to do it this way. It's just, I would much rather prefer to make it using class blueprints, but I feel like class blueprints are just more complexity. I'll get into that next week, and then we'll stick to level blueprints for this week. Okay, so let's make a door. The first thing is, let's just find a shape that we can use that'd be a good door. I'm going to take one of these cubes that are in the level, and I'm just going to duplicate it. I'm going to Alt-drag that guy, and I'm going to reset his rotation and its scale. I'm just going to make it kind of look door-shaped. And remember, you can, if you haven't watched the videos, you guys should totally watch the level videos, but remember you can hit the end key to drop a door. I'm also going to delete the light. I can delete the light and this toggle visibility. Keep the trigger volume there. I just want to get rid of the light because the light's kind of being obnoxious right now. Yeah, if you look at my blueprint, I just got rid of I got rid of all the light stuff. And you know what, I was going to use a cube, but I realized that there's actually, if you type door in here in the content browser with the game folder selected, there's actually a static mesh door, which we can totally use. And there's even a frame that you can put it under. The snapping is working against me right now. Struggle is real. Okay. Maybe I will actually use this guy too. Just get something reasonable. And don't mind that the door doesn't have collision yet, so don't worry about that. Okay. You guys have something that you feel like for a door? Maybe? What about you, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Found what stuff?
yeah,
Oh, okay. Nice. So you should still have the trigger, okay? So if you can't find a trigger, go in the outliner and type trigger volume. And I'm going to shape the trigger to be kind of like more in line with where the door is. Just kind of move the trigger to be on top of the door. So this is what I currently have, what it looks like, and then from the top view, so from a top-down perspective, there's my trigger, and there's my door frame. The next step is that we're going to select the door, click on whatever door mesh you placed, and we need to uncheck the static mobility option here. By default, any static mesh you place in Unreal is optimized so that you can place thousands of them. Like it's designed so you can place like lots of these guys, but in our case, we're using this guy as something that's dynamic. He's going to move. He's going to change state. In order for that to work properly, the movable checkbox must be enabled. So change from static to movable for your door itself. Okay. Got it? How about you, Michael? Good? Just click on a door, and then right at the very top right, there should be a... Okay. Yeah, make sure that's movable. All right? Okay, so go back to your blueprint now. And we should still have these two trigger volumes that overlap, right? First thing we're going to do is select the door in the level. So make sure you have the door selected. And then right-click and create a reference to that door. Just like what we did for light, okay? And the first thing we're going to do is let's just toggle the visibility again, right? We're going to do the same thing that the light was, except this time, drag a wire and do visibility again. I just want to prove that door can be hidden like a light can. And then play.
So we're not opening the door, we're just making the door.
We are opening the door, but so the way I work, like in my 9 years, I usually start with like the most basic thing. I don't like to dive in and just immediately do what I don't know yet. I know that triggers work with toggling visibility, so if I can get that just to work at all, okay, cool. I can detect that the player has gotten close to the door and then do something to the door. What that thing that I do to the door is not really important. The important part is that this part works here, right? That I can get close to this door, and then door, instead of, just use your imagination here, instead of turning invisible, imagine that the door is opening in this case, right? Because that's what we're about to do. So do you guys both have this, the door turning invisible? Yeah. Okay. So here's something else that we're going to do now. So now we're going to get into outside the realm of just toggling visibility. We can modify properties on doors by a lot of different ways. But first, I'm going to just look at this door here, and I'm just going to click the door, and I'm going to switch to the rotation widget here. And I kind of want the door to do this, right? I'm just moving it in the level now. What's actually happening to the door right now? What am I modifying? Look at the property grid over here. Look at that Z value. Can you guys see that? I'm modifying it, right? Let's say this is what I want the door to look like. When I open the door, I want it to go this way. So I want to set the rotation here. That is the yaw, if I hover over that. I want to set the rotation to be 120 degrees. And if I can just set the door to be 120 degrees, then the door is considered open, right? And your door should pivot like that too. That's the nice part about this mesh specifically. It has the pivot at the right spot. So why don't we set the rotation of the door instead of turning him invisible, okay? So let's delete the toggle visibility. Keep the reference to the door itself. Drag a wire from the door. And I want you to type a set space rotation. Don't actually type the word space. I just did set rotation as two separate words. And I want this guy here. The first guy under utilities transformation on call function on SM door 9. Okay? You'll see two here. This one here will work just as well, but I like this one because it automatically connects it to the door. Yeah, it does that nice. Oh, because, yeah. So that happened because I still have the door selected. So yeah, you can. These are the same thing. So just delete the one. It's fine. So now this is just like the toggle visibility function. It has who you're targeting, but now instead of like propagate the child, it has a rotation. This is the roll, the pitch, and the yaw of the thing you want to set to. So if you go into the yaw and type 120 here and plug that in, now when you walk up to the door, it's not just invisible, it actually popped open. We're going to get into actually animating it in just a minute, but this is good enough for now. And then next, I want you guys to reset the door back when you leave. So set the rotation back to what it was. Okay. Christian, do you have Unreal here?
I was just watching.
I have it up on Zool. I copied it to Zool if you didn't bring it.
No, I have it, but it's missing one file. I believe the MXRV of the.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna ask you when you were done.
Yeah, I have it here if you want it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But I don't have to download the whole thing.
Here, I will give it to you.
Um,
It's on Zool as well. It's in the root folder here. All right, so what I want you guys to do is when you get closer to the door should be open, and then when you leave, it should pop closed.
Mine only just barely pops.
What did you type in for your yaw?
Negative 100.
Oh, right, but so when you leave the door, that looks right.
Yeah, but it's not.
Did it work when you touched it the first time?
No, as soon as I go up to it, it pops.
Try putting 120 there instead of negative 100. And yeah, instead of negative 120. Yeah. I want to say that rotation is going to be relative. Where did it go? But I did open that.
So let's try to go 100.
Yes.
That's a lot of rotation.
That's degrees. Are you doing a dual monitor setup?
yeah, I'll be tough for that too.
Did you get it to close as well?
I just put it on there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Oh, you know, I think it's going all the way around. So I actually need to go over 120. Because now it's actually open more.
Yeah, maybe 140.
I always believe in making big moves. Let's see if I'm gonna go 160. Going crazy.
So I'm going to also reset this actor rotation back to normal. So I'm going to just drag a box around these guys. Oh, that's really weird. Huh. I don't know why my copy paste is not working. Weird. And set the actor rotation back down to 0. So now when I walk up to it, it's open, and then when I leave, it closes. Okay. I mean, that's all well and good, but no door ever opens that fast, right? There's some more we can do with this. Fucking door. Did you get yours to reset properly too, John?
Reset. Oh, still try close.
Yeah.
I am doing that right now.
one of the more powerful features in Blueprint now. I used to wait to show this until later, but it's just too useful to like hold off on showing. There are a lot of times when you're making a game where you want something not to happen instantly. You want something to happen like smoothly over some time. Specifically doors or like elevators, or even things like a jump pad. Things that need to change state in your game over some X amount of time. For our door, we want this door to open over, let's say, 2 seconds, right? Right now it's snapping open. But we don't actually want that. What we want instead is to slowly change that rotation so that it properly rotates the door and looks like the door is actually swinging open, right? So there's 2 ways to do that primarily in Blueprint. One is to use a matinee. So a matinee lets you, matinee is kind of like a really, really big featured, it's kind of like meant for people that are like making cutscenes or you want to like manipulate a lot of actors at the same time. It's great for like fly-throughs on levels because you can animate cameras and stuff. It has like preview functionality, like you'll see cameras and stuff. That we're going to get into, and then there's another one that's a smaller version of that that's usually more for like things like this, where you usually move like 1 or 2 things, and it's called a timeline. So we're going to use, I can answer the phone now. We're going to use a timeline today, and a timeline is just a smaller version of Blueprint. All a timeline is, it says it's another function that when it starts, it's going to run for some amount of time, and as it's running, it's going to spit out a bunch of data. Is it almost exactly like the event tick, just like what you guys use for tick, you know, how there's like, it fires as often as possible? That's what timeline is going to do. And it's going to, and the tick fired how many seconds have passed since the last frame, right? But timelines let you control so that you spit out whatever data you want instead. So we're going to use that to basically spit out the rotation of the door. So our timeline is going to run for 2 seconds and then change the rotation over that 2 seconds to be what we want. And it's going to give us nice curves to edit things with. So just right-click in your Blueprint. I'm going to do it up here and type timeline. And it's going to ask you to name it. I'm going to name this thing door opening. And so you should see something like that. I actually named it door. If you want to rename it, you can just click the name up here. And you can rename it if you want. You guys both have a timeline?
Do we need to make 2 of them?
No, we actually only have to make 1, which is nice. Because if you look, the timeline actually has a bunch of inputs. It has like a ton of different execution inputs. Yeah, so there's play from start, stop, reverse from the end, so go all the way to the end and then reverse, or actually set the specific time of the timeline. So see how it actually has 2 execution wire outputs too? One is upward, like that tick that fired as often as possible. This thing is called as often as possible. Okay? And then there's finished, which gets called once when the timeline has completely been done. So this is, if we set it for 2 seconds, for instance, it'll happen. This will only fire once after 2 seconds, but this thing will fire as often as possible over that 2 seconds. So it'll fire constantly. So you have your choice of what you want to hook into. So here's how we're going to edit it, because timeline is kind of unique. Even though it's a function, it's kind of a special guy. You double-click on this guy, and he'll bring up a new editor. This is the timeline editor. So timeline lets you choose to modify a lot of different things over some amount of time. The first thing we're going to do is specify the length of how long we want a timeline to be. This is how long do you want your door to take to open. Okay? I said 2 seconds, so I'm going to put 2 here.
What did you put down?
I just double-clicked on the timeline. So up here in the top left are various things that you have the option of adding to animate over your 2 seconds. So the top left here are floats. So these let you animate numbers. So we're going to use this to animate our door. But you also have the option of animating vectors, which are X, Y, Z. So it's like 3 floats together. We don't worry about that for now. Also, you can say, hey, timeline, I want you to fire off new execution wires at specific points. So you can also add your own versions of these. Right now, timeline by default only has 2. It has one that fires as often as possible, and then one that fires at the end. But you can add your own custom ones that fire at specific points in your timeline. Let's say I have a timeline that runs for 2 seconds. You can also add something that says, hey, I want to fire an execution wire after 0.5 seconds, and again at 0.8 seconds, and again at 0.6. Whatever you want, they will add new execution wires for you. You can have that control too. But instead what we're going to do is we're going to add a new float track. So click the F button, top left. And we're going to name this rotation. So the graph editor is a very quintessential part of Unreal. You'll see this in material editors. You'll see this in particle editors. You'll see this in Blueprint everywhere. This is a really, really common thing to know how to use. So this is just one example of the graph. And it's pretty simple. If you guys have ever taken any animation classes, it's going to seem pretty familiar. Have you guys taken any animation classes yet? No, not yet? It's fine if you haven't. So this red line indicates the graph. So from left to right is the time, okay? So it starts at 0 seconds. You can see the labels up here, and goes to 2 seconds. The lighter gray area is the actual part where your graph matters. That's the actual part of where the points on your graph get evaluated, and then everything outside in the dark gray areas that don't matter. So currently, and the Y value here, this is the value it's going to return. So this is going to be the rotation we want to set. So look at the range right now. It's going from negative 0.5 to 0.5. It's too small. Like we will actually want to move our door from 0 to like 120 degrees, or in your case, negative 90 to like 170. So what we want to do is we're going to add first 2 keys. So if you hold down Shift and you click the red line, you can insert a key. And so what I want you to do first is insert a key at as close to the beginning as possible, and then as close to the end as possible too. Okay, so you should have 2 of these keys. Notice I have 2, one at the beginning, one at the end. So select the first key. She should show up as orange. And I'm going to set the time of this key to be 0 up here. I'm going to actually type 0 to really snap it to the beginning. And then the value here, I'm also going to have this be 0. So I just selected the key, and I went up here. I just typed 0, 0. And then, because I want it to happen exactly at time 0 and have the value of 0. And then the second key, I'm going to set the time to be 2. And the value here, I'm going to plug in to be the degrees that the door needs to be at the end, right? So this is what the rotation of the door you want to be at the end is. So I'm going to type 120. And then look what happens to my graph. It's all jacked up. Well, that's why they added these 2 buttons over here. You're going to click these a lot. Basically, you want to zoom in to fit your keys. So these 2 buttons to the left at the time, just click both of those, and then it'll change your view. So now I go from 0 and to 120 at the top here. If you look at this graph, if you have done any animation, you'll see that this is a linearly interpolated graph. It's a straight shot from one to the other. There's no easing in or out. This is not great for games. You should almost never use something like this, a straight line. I find it to be very unappealing to look at. It's not believable. So instead, what you can do is click on the first key, and I want you to right-click on it. And you get these options of how you want to interpolate. By default, it's linear, but what we want is the auto interpolation. And what this does, yeah, it gives you an ease in, speeds up in the middle, and then eases in, eases out again. And you have these little tangents that you can modify as well if you want to tune it even more. This is in timeline. do you guys have points on your timeline? Cool. Okay, so go back to the event graph and look at your timeline. See how he now has rotation. That's the float track that we added. He has a new one that didn't exist before. So now what we can do is put this guy in between the two. So I'm going to have him play when you begin overlapping. And I'm going to have him, on update, set the actor rotation. But we're not done yet. So we need to get this rotation into here. See how this, we have the value that we want. This thing is actually printing out what we need. Let me just prove it to you first. This is going to be a little bit of a, actually you guys should follow along too. So I have this thing connected here. Let me just disconnect this for now. I'm going to just move this up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a wire from here. I'm going to have it print a string. And I'm going to plug that into here. Just like what we did earlier for the tick. So you guys should do this too. So hook up a print string to update and have it plug the rotation into there. And then walk into your trigger. And you should see it print out a bunch of numbers when you walk in. It'll only do it once because we're only playing it. We're not reversing it yet. I'll show you how to make it exactly 120. Okay, did it work for you the first time? Did it print out all the numbers? Yeah, the second time it won't do anything because we're not resetting it back. But you may also see that it doesn't exactly end at your number. And if you want to exactly end at your number, double click on your timeline and click this checkbox that says use last keyframe. That'll force it to be exactly the last keyframe when the blueprint ends. There's still some imprecision, like 120. If you want it to be exactly 120, like there's still like 0.00000 like 1 like percent like difference. So it's as close as it can get with precision. But that last keyframe, I always check that just to make sure that it always hits that value. It's guaranteed to hit that value, which is not always true. Okay, right. So let's plug this into the rotation. I'm going to delete this, the print string. This is just to prove that it was working. And I'm going to plug it in back to set actor rotation here. Okay. So it would be nice if I could just take this rotation and plug it directly into here, right? Like you can't though. I want to put it into the yaw. I just want to stick it in. I can't just know that I want it to be the yaw. Well, the problem is that this float is one number, while rotation is 3 different numbers. And so you have to be responsible for telling Blueprint which of those 3 numbers you care about. Okay? And in order to do that, you actually need to feed it what it's expecting. It's asking for a rotation. Look at the color of this guy. Right? It's like a light purple. this guy's green, they're not compatible. It even says float is not compatible with rotator. So if you want to fix that, you have to feed it. So how do I get this thing into here? There are two ways. One of the easiest ways is to take this guy, drag him backwards, and then there's a, near the bottom, there's an option to make a rotator. Aha. And now, when it says make a rotator, now it has the same colors as the rotation here. So now I get the choice of which one of these I want to plug it into. Pitch is pitching forward and backwards, so tipping forward or backwards. Yaw is turning left and right, and then roll is rolling to the side. In this case, I want it to be the yaw. Okay. You guys both have that? The make rote rotator? Okay, go ahead and play and test it. And there you go. And then we'll have to hook it up so that it closes properly too when you leave. So it'll work the first time, and then after that it'll snap. And this part's actually really easy. Just delete. If you want it to close properly on your end overlap, just call reverse on your timeline. And that's it. This will be your door.
Well, it looks like it like completely just extends all the way around.
Right, because you're starting at 0 in your timeline, and you're going to 170. But you need to start at -90 and go to, actually -90 is 270. So you should actually start at 270 and go to 170. So click the first key. Yeah, that should be 270, and then your second key should be, or that should be 270, and your first key should be 170. And then click on these two buttons here besides the little up and down arrows. Yeah, that one, and then click on your second key, and that one should be 170. Because -90 is equal to 270. If you just subtract 90 from 360.
Math is no fun.
Did you get your door opens?
Oh,
Does it close?
even when you like it's not fully open.
Yeah. It works properly? Does that work better?
It opens, so now I just need to reverse it.
Yep.
Drag this over to.
You just want to on leave. You just want to reverse it when you leave the trigger line. So where does it that event fires when you leave, right? So that needs to go in the reverse. Yep. So, I mean, you can delete these. You don't need that. I mean, the fact that it doesn't have collision kind of sucks, but.
So you just walk right through it. I'm like, I'm not gonna wait for this.
I think we can fix that actually. Let me just see here. Let's see if we can fix the door collision. I'm just going to try it here first because I want to say so if you guys want to add collision to your door, click on your door in the level. And then on the right, under details, you'll see there's your static mesh. And click on the little magnifying glass next to the static mesh. And it'll open the content browser here to the door. Okay. So click on this guy, it'll open this guy. Double click on him in the content browser. It'll show the door in the static mesh editor. And then go under the collision menu and do this, add box simplified collision. And then save. Go under collision, and then it's the third option from the top. You should see a little purple box, purple or green box show up around the door. you find it, Michael?
Add blocks in the side collision.
Yep. It should look like that option here, the third one. And then save, and then go back to your level and your. Except the, now it's too, now I can't actually walk through it.
Yeah, now it's a one-way door.
I think I'm too big for this. Oh no, it's because the
door's closing.
the door is actually
Door's opening in on you.
It's not opening with the.
yeah, the collision is not actually moving with the door. Just a pivot. I just want to try one more thing. Yeah, see how there's like a box? That's the collision that's not actually moving. That's okay. We'll worry about the collision stuff later. We're not really going to use that door specifically, so we're going to use blueprints to animate the door and stuff. Let's see. What else should we do next? Let's make an elevator.
The same thing, except you just change it to.
Yeah, it's almost the same thing. Yeah, it's very, very similar. The difference is that instead of rotating it, we're going to move it. And instead of having the trigger, the trick with elevators is that you want the trigger to move with the elevator. So if you like fall off the elevator should come back down. And it should only start going up as soon as you step onto it, right? So let's do that next. Let's leave this door here. And let's use one of these. There have these shapes. We can use one of these shapes as an elevator, or you can add one of these shapes here. I'm going to add a shape from the shapes folder so that it's an actual static mesh. Don't use BSP. BSP will not work. So here you can click on a cylinder too. Maybe I'll make a disk elevator. And let's just widen it out a little bit. That's going to be my elevator. And let's just have it so I can jump up to there. So it's the same kind of idea. We're going to want a trigger volume that is hooked up to this elevator, but we want the trigger volume to move with the elevator, right? We want this elevator to go up and then come back down when it's finished. So let's just get a few bits of information here. There is the X, Y, and Z. So as I move this guy up, notice the Z value goes up to like 445, and it starts at about 130, right? So we're going to add about 300 units to this guy. We're going to move him up about 3 meters. So let's first set up a trigger on this guy. I'm going to just drag a trigger volume on there, and don't worry about the shape. We'll worry about the we'll be able to add cylinder-shaped triggers when it comes to class blueprints. But for now, I'm just going to try to make this thing reasonable. Make sure that the cube is pretty much just within the circle. And I'm just going to go to a orthographic view here. Looks pretty good. And make sure that the trigger over here is on top of the elevator. So with that second trigger volume selected, let's rename him to be elevator trigger. And this trigger we're going to mark as movable. Same with the base. So both the trigger and the elevator mesh we're going to mark as movable because we're obviously going to be moving them. Now, the easiest thing that I found, let me rename the elevator too. I'm going to rename this guy to be elevator mesh. So now I named them both. I have an elevator mesh and an elevator trigger. And what I can do is I can take the elevator trigger and I can drag it on top of the mesh in the outliner. And I showed you guys this last week. Well, what that means is now when the elevator moves, look at the trigger. It's moving with the elevator. Sorry, let me make this bigger. Look at that trigger, right? No matter where the elevator goes, the trigger goes with it. Okay, so I want you guys to set this up too. Make sure that you have your trigger parented to your mesh. This way you can, when one moves, all you have to do is move the mesh, and then the trigger will move as well.
So you just
Yeah, select the trigger. I would would you rename the trigger maybe? You can just find them up here. Sometimes it's hard to select the geo, so the volume, so you can just search for elevator up here. Maybe just drag that on top of the mesh. Okay. Now try moving the mesh and make sure the trigger moves with it. Christian, I'm recording all of this so you can watch it later so you can push out your everything.
Alright, cool, thanks.
Yeah, sometimes it can do like this one, that's all. If you name them both elevator, just type elevator up there and make it a little easier. And then you can just drag the trigger on top of the elevator. Now try moving the elevator to move the trigger with it. That's not a trigger. Cool. Okay. So, as you might guess, we're going to do kind of the same thing as the door was, only now we're going to do it with the elevator. We're going to, instead of rotate the mesh, we're going to move the mesh. I kind of feel like you guys can do this. I think you guys have all the data, all the info.
We create all these the overlap and all that stuff again, right?
Yep. I think you guys can do all of this. It's almost exactly the same. The only difference is that instead of set actor rotation, you guys are going to take your mesh. I'll just help you a little bit, which is to take your mesh. And normally we did set actor rotation, but you're going to do set actor location instead. Okay. That's the only difference. Well, the timeline is also going to be different. Instead of rotation, you're going to be setting the location instead. So I want you to spend some time working on that, and I'll come around. I'll help you too if you get stuck. But yeah, you need to set up the triggers first. So make sure your triggers are set up first, and then you can work on setting up the mesh. then we'll do a key and a door after this. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to have a float track. How long do you want the elevator to take? Remember you type 2 for the door here? Okay, so it's going to take a long time to get up there. Okay. And then you're going to add a float track. Cool. And rename this guy. This is going to be probably the height of the elevator. Cool. You hit enter. So the first thing you should kind of do is figure out what are the heights at the start and at the end. So what is that height? Okay, what is the start? Okay, so those are going to be your keys. You have to zoom out. So if you use the mouse wheel, you can click these buttons up here. It'll resize it. Yeah, that's because it resizes the one key. Just here's a trick. Just insert a second key. Just put a key anywhere, and then set the time to be 8 to 10. You can just hit this. You want that a little bit better.
Yeah, so yeah, that needs to
And then just size it horizontally. Where's your second? Put another key in there. Put a second key in there and set the time to be 0 on that key. And then scale horizontally. There you go. 0. So make those values what you like that 10 inches under your 10 seconds. And then there's scale it horizontal. Like what the clip looks like. I always click those. So now now this is from 0 to 10. So now your graph is in a curve. And then all you have to do is set the values here. So you have to find out the height of the elevator at the beginning, and then the height of the elevator at the end. And that will be your two values. What is the start? What is the start position? 105?
Yeah.
And what is the finish position?
5.
That's good. Now scale it again. Cool. And then again, you can make the interpolation type to be auto, so you can right click on the first key. And use that key. Cool. Now you gotta hook that up to that action.
Why is it starting in the up position? Do I need to put it down?
No, show me your blueprint. It's the second tab, but well, you aren't actually connecting this to this at all.
So I don't need it to do that, so I was trying to get that open.
So remember what I did up here? It was drag the wire backwards, right? So you don't want rotation. That'll spin the elevator. What you want is, yeah, delete that guy. Drag the wire backwards. And rotate it back here. So height is going to plug into which one of those? What's up and down? Yeah, so that's Z. And what does X and Y have to be? X and Y needs to be what it is in the elevator currently. So get the numbers from the level.
From the level?
What is the X and Y position of the elevator right now? What are those? You plug that X and that Y into that function.
And that's for the second position, right?
That's just for the final position. Yeah, perfect. That X and Y doesn't change. So keep that, your elevator only goes up and down. So it'll stay here. It only goes up and down, right? It doesn't move around this way. So that X and Y will always remain the same. So you can just type in values
okay.
there.
Okay, I get it. My X was
Oh, these need to be dynamic. We need to get them both to be movable. That's the one thing that I was worried that was missed. It makes you pretty also be movable. They both need to be movable, otherwise it won't let you do it at all. No. You can always play from here too. You don't actually have to switch from blueprint to play. And then it should stop. Does it go down again? Just hook that.
Oh, I didn't put that in. The reverse.
this still starting from the highest point.
And what does your timeline look like? Show me your timeline. What is the first key? Oh, your first key. What is the value of the first key?
Supposed to be
Click on
130.
Click on that actually. You might have to right click on it. That's 270.
What the hell? Oh, that's the door. Sorry.
130.
Which is the ground.
Okay.
And this should be 530.
Okay. And show me your event graph.
Event graph.
have to move it to be on the ground.
Slide it in. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I misunderstood your question. It should be at one whatever here, so you should make sure that's matching. Even right in that pressure here is still. You could have just placed it where you needed it to. Wait, stop there for a second.
Crashing in here.
No. So I bet you your mesh wasn't set to remove yet. Click on your mesh if you're already see by default there's also the trigger needs to be removed from the speed. Yeah. And you should also chronically save. Like I always have like if the editor crashed right now, how would you feel?
I was gonna say if that since it just says
And yet you still continue to play it and save it. Oh well. What we can do.
I have to.
Okay, you might need to save the level. So you can just hit Control S and save everything. You want to do save all. And then click on your mesh again. It's movable. And then show me your blueprint again. How about this? Go ahead and go put your elevator, like go walk to your elevator, and then during while the game is playing, switch to your blueprint to see what's actually happening. Yeah, so after you step on the elevator, I'm just going to have you hit, I think it's Control and Alt. Hold on, it's Control. I think it's speed. Right click in gear. Do type in gear. That way you don't have all the way. Let's step on right now. Press shift and press shift and control. It's either shift and control or shift and alt to get the mouse. Press shift and alt. Let's see your blueprint running. Shift F4. You play from here and you shift F4. So now you're going to mouse go to your blueprint. Right, so I want you to step off of the elevator and step back on. Just click in there in the viewport and then walk off of it. And then walk on and press shift F1. And switch to the blueprint. See how I don't see that thing firing? It should be running right now.
Oh yeah.
It means that overlap. Oh. You got that right there. What does that say?
Over the mesh.
So that's when you overlap with the mesh, but not the trigger. It's supposed to be the trigger. It's supposed to be the trigger.
Not that.
Yeah. There are cases where you can overlap with meshes, but in this case you want it to be the trigger instead. So you'll have to delete that guy. So stop playing and then delete that guy and then make it be the trigger instead. Select your trigger first and then yeah, the brush is really tricky. And then here you can type overlap.
just want to unkill myself.
Okay, we have one more thing. Pick up, and I wanna get a key. We're gonna make a key, and then we're going to script the door to be open based on the key, and then we're done for today. Okay. So let me make the elevator as well, because I might as well show the screen. So I'm going to pick the trigger and overlap, like bam, and then overlap like that. There's my overlap events, and then I'm going to make a timeline. It's going to play, and this one's going to reverse. And my elevator goes from 130 to 430. Five seconds seems reasonable. Just add two keys, 0, 430, and the first key, or 0, 130, 5. There's my timeline. Interpolate it nicely. Name this track height. And then in here, this is going to make a vector. Height plugs into Z. This thing updates. And then -365 and -630. We will soon learn how to do it so that make an elevator so that it works no matter where you place it. For now, we're going to hard code it, but we can make it so that the elevator can move relative to where it's placed. But for now, we can just do this. Step on it, and then when I jump off. No, it does not. You have to put that behavior in it. You could probably put a volume underneath the elevator when you begin. We could make a kill volume underneath if we wanted to. Okay, so that's what the elevator should look like. Let's do two more things. One, a key, and then let's set up our door to only open when you have that key, okay? Because that's going to be the homework is to make a extension onto your maze that requires some type of key door element. So whether it's find a blue key and open the blue door, or red key, red door. So let us make something that's shaped like a key. Let's use this. It's a banana. That is our key. Let's see if I can find a material here. There's our key. Oh yeah. Too bad there isn't actually anything that yes. Ground moss. This is going to be our key. And I want it so that when I pick up this thing, it will first just hide the mesh. We could also have it be destroyed too. So I'm going to make this thing be movable again. So you guys should follow along too. Place it something that is vaguely reminiscent of a key. And we are going to use this guy. And we're going to talk about pickups. You guys have some kind of key? Anything? Nothing? Doesn't. Okay, so we're going to place another trigger volume on top of this key, just like what we did before. And I'm going to scale it appropriately. Again, I don't usually do keys in the level. You're going to usually use class blueprints for this, but for this example, it's fine. And I'm going to name my key and my mesh appropriately, my trigger and my key mesh appropriately. So I'm going to take my trigger that I've placed, I'm going to name this key trigger, and I'm going to take my mesh that I placed and name this key mesh. And all I want to do is when I hit the trigger, I want to kill the key. So I have, do you guys both have a trigger placed yet? Okay. So place a trigger. I named it key trigger. Go to your blueprint and add in overlap event for your trigger. An overlap event for your trigger. You only need one when you begin overlapping with the trigger. And go back and grab a reference to your key. So click on the mesh in the level and then add a reference to him. So you should have both the overlap for the trigger and then the mesh itself. And then from the mesh, you're going to drag a wire from the mesh reference, and you're going to type destroy actor. And you're just going to plug that into the begin overlap. So when you overlap with the trigger, you're going to destroy the actor. It should work when you press play and you walk up to the area with a key, the mesh should go away, like so. The macaroni noodle should get devoured. Hopefully you'll have something more key-like. Did you get it working too?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have the concept of something that interacts with you when you walk over trigger and gets destroyed. That's great, but now we have this need of keeping track of whether you have the key or not. What I want to have happen is I want to walk up to this door, and I want it to not open unless I've picked up that thing first. Okay? Pretty simple. It's the idea that you have a dependency on this part in order for the door behavior here to work. Let me show you a little trick too. I'm going to drag a box around my entire door behavior, all of my nodes. I'm going to hit the C key. Brings up a comment box. And the reason why I'm going to do this, I'm going to name this guy the door opening behavior, just so I can categorize. It's pretty important to organize your blueprint behavior. And I like to use comments. Comments are great for this. It lets you separate out at a glance easily, like what the different behaviors of your blueprint are. So here's a door, and here's the elevator. Really easy to tell at a glance, right? You can even change the color of the various comments here by clicking on the details here. Okay. I like comments. Comments are a nice way to just, because blueprints tend to get a little bit crazy if you don't start organizing them early. So here's our key. So I need to get into a little bit of a discussion here about the notion of variables. Now I need to kind of, when I'm playing my game, I kind of remember in the game that I've picked up the key. Rather, I need to track whether I've picked up the key or not. So right now, I haven't picked up the key. And as soon as this occurs, I want to remember that I've picked that up. And one of the easiest way to do that is to use a variable to store that info. A variable is just nothing more than some, you can imagine like a bucket that's able to hold some information. And that bucket is, you can put stuff in that bucket. So like in this case, I can put the information and say, hey, does this bucket contain, it contains the info of whether I picked up the key or not. So I have this imaginary bucket in my head. And inside there, it basically stores whether I have picked up the key or I haven't yet. Almost like an inventory system, like you pick it up and you want to keep track of it. So variables are kind of like, I guess like an inventory. It's one way to think about it. And there's lots of different types of variables, and I'm going to get into all of them next week. But today we're going to just focus on one. We're going to focus on one variable type that just says, hey, is this thing true or is this thing false? And this thing here is going to be, did he pick up the key or did he not pick up the key yet? And so it's either going to be true or false. So if I ask you the question, did you pick up the key yet, you can store that information into a variable. And we're going to use that here. So over on the left inside your blueprint, you have some of these existing, these are timelines that are visible. But up here on the top, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new variable to store whether you have picked up the key or not. So I just want you to click that button. It'll bring up a new variable that shows up on the left that says new var. Okay? I'm going to just type the question, have you, or do you have the key? By default, it's already a Boolean type, which just means is this true or false. So we're not going to change that. But I am going to compile it one time after I've added the variable. Can you read that, Michael? Like I clicked on that and then okay. After you compile it, notice that if you have that variable selected in the details window, now there's a little checkbox here that lets you tell me whether I have the key or not. So I can control that behavior. What I'm going to do is I want to take this variable and I want to set it to be true. I want to essentially click this checkbox after you pick up the noodle, the macaroni noodle. So just take this variable and I want you to just click it and drag it into the graph and then let go. It's going to ask you, do you want to get the value or do you want to set the value? In this case, I picked up the macaroni noodle, so I'm changing the fact that I have the key. So I want to change this Boolean, so I'm going to set it. And it brings up this new function. I'm going to connect it to the destroy actor. And now you get this, hey, set do you have the key? Do you want to set to true or false? And now you can say, yes, I do have the key. Does that make sense so far? Yeah, you guys got this? So it's changing it. So now after you pick it up, you will have the key. Cool. Let's play. But wait, I can still open the door even without the key. Huh. So I pick up the key. What's that? It's an elevator key? It could be an elevator key. You can make this thing drive whatever. So the problem is that I do track, like look here, if I play and look at my blueprint here on the lower right. So I'm going to walk over this guy and that thing fires and now I have the key. But I need to use that information in some way. So let's back up a second here. There's my door opening behavior, right? So right now, the door opens all the time. There's nothing to say, hey, you should or shouldn't open the door. It just says you walked in, go ahead and open the door. I don't really care. Just go ahead and play this timeline. What we're going to do instead is we're going to ask the blueprint if the player has picked up the key or not first. Okay.
All you have to do is just drag this down and connect it instead of begin overlap, right?
Or you just drag your key.
It would be nice if I could just be like, I do want to know if I have the key or not. I want to use this variable, right? So you are going to drag this in here, and you're going to do get. So I have this problem though where I have this thing. This is telling me, this thing tells me whether I have the key or not, right? This thing is either true or false. But how do I stick this in here? I can't connect it this way. Like that thing doesn't work. You can't connect the wire here.
And then I guess you have to click on that and touch out.
Yeah, but if I click this into here, I can't plug that into here either. Okay? This is just telling me true or false. It's just telling me do I have the key or not. So we're going to use a brand new function which is specific for Blueprint. And all this function does is it has one input and two outputs. The input is, hey, true or false, and the outputs are depending on whether it's true or false. So here, drag a wire from here, and I want you guys to type branch. Branch is just kind of like what it sounds like. It's going to branch the execution wire. It's going to split that execution wire based on some condition. Okay. So let me just take a minute here to talk about this branch. So this is a function like anything else. It's just like anything else here. It has one input. And when that input fires, the branch is going to run and say, hey, which one of these two things do you want me to fire? Okay? The decision is completely based on this value here. Okay? So do you have the key? If that thing, you do have the key, this wire will fire. If you do not have the key, this wire will fire. Okay? So I can plug this in here. So I can see if I have the key or not to use in between here.
How do you get the branch?
I drag the wire from here, from the variable. Do you have the variable yet?
Yeah.
Okay, it should look like this. It should just be a single oval.
Yeah, I got it.
And then type branch in here. Yeah. What's up, dude? Just saying hey? Oh, nice. We're doing keys and doors. So what you want to do now is this guy, see ya, this guy plugs in between here. Right now, it always fires play, right? But now we want to connect to the branch instead. And we will only open the door if the true is connected. Same with this guy. The reverse, we're going to have to duplicate this guy. We're going to make a copy of that. We need two of the same branches here. We're going to reverse. Okay? And we're not going to do anything here. We could do something, actually. We could do something here after we prove that this works. What you can do here is on false. You can drag a wire and do print string. And you can type, hey, you need to find the key first. So I could do that if I wanted to. Does that make sense so far? You guys have the branch connected here? And if you want to, you can have the false link fire, hey, you need to find the key first. And now every time I try to walk into the door, it says, hey, you need to find the key first. If I walk over and get the key and then go to the door, now it opens. Granted access. Branches are going to be really common too. you're going to branch on all kinds of things. Did you get it to work, Michael? Do you have your key up to the door?
But you have collision on your door. Yeah, I have everything done. I just have to move my key.
How do you get through your door if it has collision on it? What did you do?
I open it when I hit the collision.
Huh.
I can't get back to it though.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you scale your door up as well?
Yeah.
That's probably why. Probably the
Pin my ear on the door frame.
yeah, or something. The collision is rotating, but it's a little bit too fast, so you can't fit through. So you have to like make the door frame, the white part, bigger. Yeah.
Alright.
Cool. And you can have it. Try printing something to the screen when you don't have the key. You want it to, so it will not false there. If you don't have the key, I want you to print something. So do print screen. Any questions so far on any of this? Okay. All right, so that's it for today. Let me give you guys the homework. I want you guys to, in your maze levels that you made, add 2 keys that unlock some part of your level. You can have the keys be like an elevator or a door, just like what we did, but I want you to have 2 of them in your level. Okay, like 2 separate keys, just like in Doom 2 or original Doom. You pick up like the red key, opens up the red door. You find the blue key, opens up the blue door. But maybe the blue key is behind the red door, right? So you figure out what you want. You can kind of go crazy as much as you want, but I just want you guys to play. You do have to know how to interact with 2 sets of variables, so you need 2 variables, 1 for each key, because right now we only have 1 key in the level. And then that way you can have your elevator and your door maybe require 2 separate keys.